Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh. I'm John Lucy, and this is a special edition, a Thursday edition of your podcast where Nick is joining us from the warmer climes of Mobile, Alabama, as the 2026 draft preparation begins at the Senior Bowl and leading up to the climax, which will happen in Pittsburgh as that annual selection meeting convenes in the Steel City for the first time ever, and history shall be made. But of course, a little bit of Steelers history happened earlier this week as Mike McCarthy signed on the dotted line a 5-year deal with the Steelers and a homecoming, an emotional one for McCarthy. What we haven't seen a lot of evidence of in terms of this transition to the McCarthy era is evidence that this Steelers team is going to change in any meaningful way. I mean, McCarthy has doubled down on the quarterback's room. He likes the defense, sticking with the 3-4 configuration that goes back to the 90s. And even as he assembles his assistant and coordinator team, not a lot of meaningful signals or messages about change. In other words, I don't really pretend to know each assistant name that's floated out there or even coordinator name. Nick surely does, and we'll ask what he thinks. But where's the idea that the wanted change that we were talking about? We knew this wasn't going to be a reset, but we are expecting some change here. But I'm not seeing a lot of evidence of that.
No, I think this is going to be pretty similar to what we saw under Mike Tomlin in some ways. I think philosophically we'll see some differences. I think we'll see, there's some things McCarthy likes here. There's some things that he's going to want to run offensively that'll be different. I think you'll see it on the field in terms of the schematics. I think that'll be actually pretty stark in some of the ways that they're going to be different there. In terms of the hiring, though, man, I think a lot of it's going to be, experienced coaches that have worked under Mike McCarthy before. That's what we've gotten so far in the initial staff hirings. To me, that's not a surprise. That's kind of what he's always lent for. In Dallas, he was a little different, but from what I was told, he was not in charge of most of the defensive hiring in Dallas. That was mostly the front office, which to me says something different. And he hired his offensive staff, so he did have a pretty robust staff there of guys that were young and up and comers, veteran coaches. But I think, there's this idea that he was going to come in and be the whole scale change guy. And I just don't think that's really what he ever was going to be. It was always going to be, one of those young guys that was going to push them into a different kind of direction, a different era, if you will. And Mike McCarthy, while there will be tweaks, I think it's going to maintain a lot of what Mike Tomlin already built, is going to maintain a lot of different things. They're not going to dramatically shift their worldview. I just don't think that's Mike McCarthy's way. I don't think he philosophically disagrees with Art Rooney, Omar Khan, and even Mike Tomlin like that. So I think it's not going to be some dramatic change. There will be shifts, but I don't think it's going to be a crazy change that you're going to see over the next, few years with Mike McCarthy at the helm.
Hey, a really good question just came in on the chat talking about the current Browns special teams coach, Ventrone, who has a Pittsburgh connection, and we know the Steelers like coaches with a Pittsburgh connection. Any chance he lands in the Berg?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Ventrone, he's the type of guy that fits Mike McCarthy's kind of MO. This is, to me, a guy that is a veteran. I believe his brother played for the Steelers, Ross Ventrone. He's from Pittsburgh. I think he is Char Valley grad. So, he's a Pittsburgh guy. Would this be a good hire? Have you ever watched the Browns special teams? Probably not. Even when you're watching the Steelers and Browns play, you're probably not very focused on their special teams. Their special teams was horrific. That's putting it lightly. It was awful. There's another guy that I think has connections to Mike McCarthy and John Faisal, who was the Titans special teams coordinator. Would much prefer that hire if that's the direction they were going to go. But could Ventrone come in? I think that is certainly a possible hire for the Steelers. I would not be high on that hire, given the recent results we have seen from the Browns special teams units.
Mhm.
But yes, they did request to interview him. And so he is certainly one of the candidates there to land that special teams coordinator job. And I'm assuming since most of the staff hires are probably going to happen either by the end of this week or early next week, we'll probably find out fairly soon.
Speaking of the Browns, I mean, I'm hearing terrible reviews on their coaching search, and the fallout that Jim Schwartz now wants out of there. And apparently, this owner down there, Jimmy Haslam, is just not. He's one of the more meddlesome owners, apparently. In terms of dictating to the coaching ranks and to the GM of what he wants done. So is there any, and I heard some Steelers fans salivating on social media that, oh, wow, wouldn't that be something, have Schwartz come and do the defense in Pittsburgh? It seems like obviously the Steelers have already set sail in another direction, but any commentary on the Brown situation down there and just are we missing out on the Schwartz availability?
I feel like a lot of people could not believe what was happening in Cleveland, right? There's like it's down to Schwartz and Shieldhouse, and then the GM and the owner can't agree on it. Shieldhouse I think was the GM's guy. Haslam wanted Schwartz to stay. They end up kind of, I guess, compromising and hiring Munkin, who is kind of the third name, and then they don't even keep Schwartz, and obviously Shieldhouse stays in LA. So what a crazy situation there. As for Schwartz, listen, unless the Steelers are philosophically going to switch from a 3-4 to a 4-3, doubt it. That is, all about Jim Schwartz there. He's a 4-3, cover 2, man coverage heavy guy in a lot of ways. A lot of different things he does. The Steelers, in my opinion, don't necessarily have the personnel to run Jim Schwartz's scheme. They could start the transition there if they really wanted to, but that'll hold that part back. Very good defensive coordinator. There are some names out there at DC that we have named before, and we'll get to, I'm sure, who Steelers are likely going to hire as DC, because that is the name is Patrick Graham, and that who they are likely going to hire. And I have thoughts on that and things I've heard. But I think they're going to stick in this pocket of 3-4 backgrounded guys rather than someone like Schwartz, who I think would just dramatically change everything. And I mean, Mike McCarthy said outright on Tuesday they are going to stick with their 3-4 scheme that has been here over the last 3 decades. So don't expect that to change.
Right. And obviously, one of the reasons it's probably not going to change is all the personnel we have to fit the 3-4. But is that still, given the fact, like you said, it's a 3-decade-old tradition now in the Berg, is it something that should be analyzed and thought about whether you need to change, or is this the right decision to just double down on it?
I mean, I don't think 3-4 versus 4-3 is dramatically different in today's NFL because so much of football is played in sub packages. Most of the game is now played in nickel and dime and in big nickel and different packages where you're not even in base. You're switching defensive line techniques. And if you're in defensive line techniques, you're generally using techniques similar to a 4-3, but you don't have the linebacker. Instead, it's an extra DB. And so to me, there's like this big debate about people and someone, like there's people like calling the 3-4 base scheme outdated. I don't understand that. The Seahawks and the Patriots both run 3-4s. Like 3-4 versus 4-3, there is a folly debate among people among those two, and it is a really weird one. I don't really understand. There's always been this weird push amongst some Steelers fans that they need to switch to a 4-3. No, they need to switch their cover scheme. They need to switch some techniques up. They need to switch some things they do up front. But I don't think it has to be 3-4 versus 4-3 because they're in base, 25%, 30% of the time compared to, how much sub-package football is played. It's minuscule compared to that. And there's nothing about base 3-4 defense that is outdated for the NFL.
Okay. Looking ahead to 2026, and there was a reference to this in the comments, and I think a really good reference. I mean, as a result of, playing that 3-4, we really focus on the edge rusher. and we seem to have some talent at that position. We have the highly paid, T.J. Watt. We got Highsmith. We got Herbig, who's due for a deal, and then you have Sawyer up and coming as well. Herbig, according to some reports, is now wanting to be paid and played like a starter. Would one way for these Steelers to signal that, hey, things are changing for 2026 is a trade at that position to move some up and comers like Herbig into a bigger role? I mean, what do you think about that position and the idea Herbig needs to be paid and played as a starter?
Yeah, I mean, Herb is in the weird spot, right? He's a guy that is clearly a starter level player that is just stuck behind two guys that are also clearly stars. Now Watt is declining, and we know that, but he has this massive contract that you have to deal with. It's an albatross of a contract, and to be quite honest with you, you really can't move off the contract. I mean, he's got 3 guaranteed years on that deal. The next 2 years here will be guaranteed. He'll be here through the 2027 season almost certainly. Herbig, is going to be a free agent after this year. You could franchise tag Herbig, wait for the guaranteed money on TJ's deal to run out, move off TJ, and then extend Herb. I mean, you could extend Herb. You have the cap space to do that. It's all about what Herbig wants. And to me, Herbig's desire to re-sign in Pittsburgh is really going to be mostly about how the new coaching staff utilizes him, how much he plays. He should play way more than he did under Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin. Herbig, to me, trading Herbig makes no sense. I don't understand that. He's the young star edge rusher that should be a building block of your future. Do you know how hard it is to find star edge rushers? I mean, it's really not easy. We're talking about a guy here that is 24, going to turn 25 later this year in November. I mean, he is going to be extremely good for at least another 5 to 6 years. Why would you ever trade that? And if you're going to trade somebody from this room, I know people talk about moving off Watt. I think it makes sense, but I talked about that contract. It's really hard to move. You would have to eat a bunch of dead cap. I just don't see them doing that. Like, if there's one guy to move from the room that makes logical sense, it's probably Highsmith. The injuries have really popped up with him. He's getting a little older. He's in his prime, but 2-3 years from now, he'll be over the age of 30. Like, that to me would make more sense than trading Herbig. If I were the Steelers, though, I would keep all 3 of them and just roll with it. So we'll see what they do. I have a hard time seeing them trading Nick Herbig for all the reasons we stated. Could they trade Highsmith? That might be one to watch. I don't think they should, but if they're going to move somebody, I think he would be the one that might be the one out.
Interesting. And you mentioned that a key to this will be, the defensive assistants and the defensive coordinator, and how they utilize these up and coming pass rushers. So let's talk about that. You said you had some interesting thoughts on Patrick Graham and what he might bring to the table as seemingly the front runner for the coordinator job. I just want to preface it with I thought was an interesting comment from Steelers Takeaway on Twitter. Quote, "The more I talk to coaches, the more I realize that many assistant coach coordinator hires are about who the head coach knows, has worked with in the past, and trusts to be loyal to do what the head coach asked of them, not necessarily about what unique skill sets these coaches bring to the table." I think that's pretty on the mark. And even you said something similar, when you were talking about what McCarthy's going to do. So talk about the defense, because obviously McCarthy's going to have his hands all over the offense, but the defense is more wide open for the coordinator and some assistants to have sway. So what do you think about this, the defensive side of the coaching tree under McCarthy with the Steelers?
I mean, here's the thing. Most coaching trees and most staffs are about who you know. It's just kind of a fact. It's most of jobs in many fields are about who you know. The NFL even more so. It's really is just keep it in the family, and you kind of got to earn your stripes to get into that family. And so that's why you always see how many Kubiaks are there after Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan. If you're a football blood guy, there's going to be chances for you in the NFL. Same thing goes with a guy. I think Mike Tomlin, in some respects, is a little unique in that, where he didn't always hire people he was just best friends with. He would go outside of his immediate tree. He'd go down to the college ranks for guys that maybe he had met one time at a pro day, but I wouldn't call him friends with them. And so Mike was a little bit different in that way. McCarthy is just hiring some of his guys. I mean, we're talking about Adam Henry, the new wide receivers coach with him in Dallas for 2 years. We're talking about Patrick Graham, again, coached with him in Green Bay for a year. Some of the other reported hires, Tom Arthey played for him. That's staying. McCurley, the inside linebackers coach, staying, has been with McCarthy for years. Jared Alexander has not, but that's kind of a different one. And then James Campen, who's likely going to be the offensive line coach, was with McCarthy his entire Green Bay tenure. So, there's a lot of connections there for McCarthy and guys he knows. And I'm not surprised by that. And there's other names I would like for him to dip into. There's a younger pool of candidates that I think he can get after. I think we might see some of those. I think it needs to be a little more youth in the next few hires here, rather than, just the old boys network, but not surprising at all. This happens basically on every staff in the NFL.
What's your take and any message being sent if Patrick Graham is the defensive coordinator? Seems like he's cycled around pretty quickly. He doesn't have some long tenures in places, and usually if you're doing the job, a head coach ain't going to want to let you go unless you go up to be a head coach. You know what I mean? So
yeah, to me, man, I really like the hire Patrick Graham. I know people will look at the stats and the immediate surface level, and they'll say, "Oh, this isn't really that good of a hire." But then you kind of look beneath that. There's a veneer there, I think, where you look at what he had to work with in Las Vegas. It was bad, man. Like, it was Max Crosby in the land of misfit toys. That's what it really was. The back seven talent in particular, the secondary talent was just awful. In 2023, they had some actual pieces. Guys like Amik Robertson, guys like Nate Hobbs, guys that have legitimately played in this league and are good players. And they put up a top 10 defense in, a lot of categories I like. DVOA, success rate, EPA per play, explosive play rate, yards before contact, yards per rush. Like, they were really good that year. And Graham, when he gets talent, man, produces. And when he doesn't, he drags a team that is terrible up until league average. I mean, this was a terrible defense this past year for the Raiders, but they ranked league average in just about everything and most things. Minor miracle they did, honestly. So that, to me, is the makings of a good coach. If you can make something out of nothing, and he did consistently in Las Vegas. His scheme is not a scheme, if you will. It is how do I fit it to my players? This past year, he ran Pete Carroll's scheme, and that was kind of forced upon him. He's not a cover 3-centric guy. So the 2025 scheme is a little different than the one we'll probably see in Pittsburgh. He's run a 3-4, he's run a 4-3, he's run cover 3, he's run cover 1, he's run cover 2, he's run quarters, he's run a little bit of everything. It just depends on what you do really well. What the commonalities are among Patrick Graham is a few things. One, generally speaking, John, he is a guy that is going to really mix up the fronts and mix up the blitz looks. He does these things called sim pressures, and it sounds like what you would think, simulated pressure. It means, you're going to bring pressure from a different area, maybe wait a second, make that quarterback hold the ball a little longer, and you're either hopefully going to force, an incompletion or a pick by dropping into zones in sneaky ways or get that free pressure. He does that. The Steelers didn't do a bunch of that this year. That'll be a new wrinkle. And he really preaches three things. He preaches stopping the run first. That's, a commonality, but he did it most of the years when he was with Las Vegas. There's underneath veneer there where, people say they didn't really stop the run. If you look at some of the underneath stats, they did a nice job of that considering what they had to work with. And then you look at that. The second thing he does is he stops explosive plays. That's the other thing. He's like, stop the run, don't let them get explosives, and you got a shot, right? And so I think that they only had a 4.3 explosive play rate allowed in Las Vegas this past year, which I believe was second best in the league. So that's a good sign. And then 3, they play with violence. They play with the physicality and edge. There's a lot of things about Patrick Graham to me that are really good. And so I know there are going to be some people that look at this hire and think it's uninspiring, think it's not good. He's a different style of defensive coordinator than they've had. He's creative. He's adaptable. He's kind of all the things Terrell Austin wasn't. And to me, that's a fun kind of adventure, if you are, for the Steelers, is this is going to be meaningful change. This is a guy that they haven't had on the staff. This is a guy that they haven't had running the defense in a very long time. And I think it has the shot to be a very good defense. I'm not saying they're going to be the best defense in football, but I think they could be a top 10 defense and really be a good one. And so I think it should be a really fun hire for the Steelers when you look at the background that Graham has.
Nick, you're getting me actually excited the way you're talking. I like that news, and because we know opposing quarterbacks against the Steelers were able to get the ball out so quickly because it was as if they know exactly where to go with the ball. So there wasn't a lot of disguise and there wasn't a lot of deception, and it made it kind of neutralized our pass rush at times. So I like the idea that this guy is going to simulate and try to confuse. So I mean that gets me excited. And we have a good question in the comment concerning how Pat Queen's skills will fit in to a coordinator Graham's defense, and because apparently Queen is really dependent on the setup by the coordinator in terms of how effective he can be. So are we going to get more out of him? Are we going to get more out of Queen?
Those sim pressures I talked about, perfect for Patrick Queen. His best year was in a similar scheme that Mike McDonald ran. Patrick Graham's scheme is not all that dissimilar from Mike McDonald's scheme in a lot of ways. And so, I think Patrick Queen fits into what they do really well. They need athletic linebackers in this scheme. I think that's something that he's going to have at his disposal. Patrick Queen is the most frustrating player on the roster, right? Because we're talking about a guy that is so physical, so fast. He really creates schematic versatility in what you can do, but he also has these moments where he's in the wrong gap. He's missing tackles at will. But he is really valuable to them. And I don't think people quite understand just how valuable Patrick Queen is to the Steelers. He allows them to do a lot. Even if he's frustrating. They need him to be big this year, man. So that's one to look at. And I just hear so much about, when I've talked with people this week, after pretty much became clear they're going to hire Patrick Graham, which, by the way, just became official about 5 minutes ago. He is Steelers defensive coordinator. He is adaptable to players. If the certain player does this well, he'll try and scheme it through. He's very friendly to the play caller on the defensive side, the green dot, which is going to be PQ, obviously. And a lot of people just really like what Patrick Graham's about. He's respected as a leader. Talking with people around the league here, they really like the hire for the Steelers. So people in the league really like him. And I think for someone like Patrick Queen, who I think he needs to respect leadership because he's a very intelligent player. He has his own thoughts about how they can do it, and he needs to be kind of a respected voice in the room for you to succeed with him defensively. Patrick Graham's going to be the type of guy that can come in right away and give you that.
There you have it, folks. Nick confirms the news. Graham is your DC defensive coordinator, and Nick likes the move and likes what it's going to do for Queen and a lot of the players on this Steelers defense. So maybe re-energize that defense and get some surprise back into the scheme and confuse some quarterbacks. And also I love that idea of containing the splash plays because man, we had a bunch that killed us in 2025. Those breakdowns were just killers. Couple of random questions I just want to throw out that I've observed over this past week, as McCarthy comes in. Do we read anything into the fact that only two current players were at the big rollout presser on Tuesday? I believe it was Highsmith and Porter Jr. were the only two that showed up for this big welcome home party that the Rooneys threw for Mike McCarthy.
No, most of these guys are, wherever they are in the world right now. And some of them are on vacation. Some of them are out in their hometowns and the backwoods of Louisiana, for example, like Patrick Queen. Some of them are out in LA training. A lot of these guys are just not coming to Pittsburgh in the snow. And consider this, even if they wanted to, how many guys could actually get into Pittsburgh given the conditions this weekend? Okay. So you had Highsmith, who lives in Pittsburgh all year round. You had Joey Porter Jr., again, he lives in Pittsburgh. Guys like Mel Blount lives in Pittsburgh. Like all those guys that were there lives in Pittsburgh. And so to me, it was just more so about who was there because of the winter storm necessarily. I don't think that a lot of the guys were going to make it. So no, I don't read much into it. Now, I do think, there have been some reactions from the players like, okay, this is okay, but where are we going with this? There's some trepidation, I think, just because everyone here that we talked about when they hired him had some trepidation. I think some of the players are thinking the same things, but I also think there's some players really excited by this hire. I think, someone like DK Metcalf, really excited about this hire, given the background he has with star receivers. Pat Fryermuth, I'm sure, pleased by this hire, given how he is utilized. A skill set like his has been utilized under McCarthy in the past. So for sure, I think there is a way in which, you can question, hey, how hyped are the players, but also that doesn't have anything to do with it. There's different circumstances, guys, that why they weren't there.
Hey, give us a peek behind the scenes. When does McCarthy start reaching out and talking to players? And what like you said, there's this sense of players. Okay, where are we going? Obviously, they want to hear more. So how do these players sort of get this orientation from McCarthy, or do they wait for some type of organized team activity to really get the message? Like, how does this happen when there's a big transition, which we haven't seen for 19 seasons?
So it generally happens after the hiring happens. Now, I think, I'd heard, for example, Brian Flores before his interview was talking to some players, which makes sense. He knows some of the players that were here. He's been here in the building before. So that's not a surprise. McCarthy, after he was hired, I think, started to reach out to guys. When it became clear on Saturday and he was offered the job, that's when he starts talking to guys, talking to the core players, talking to the guys that he wants to rope into this thing, and he uses cornerstone. So I'm sure, the Cam Haywards, TJ Watts, the DK Metcalfs of the world got a message rather quickly. So that's kind of how it works out. The team will give them their numbers and say, all right, time to communicate with them, because once you're hired, man, it's like that night, your job of selling yourself to this team, of selling a vision, it starts. It really doesn't get much time. And you want to try and talk to all of the guys, certainly within 24 to 48 hours. So it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of building your staff while doing it. On top of it, there's a lot there, but that's kind of how it works. And so you reach out to your cornerstone star pieces, and I'm sure he reached out to Joey Porter Jr., reached out to Alex Highsmith, and all of those guys that we talked about as cornerstone pieces, and he's had communication with them. Because you have to start to establish your culture. And what is Mike McCarthy's culture going to be? And I think that's the tone he has to start setting with his leaders, because, Cam's then going to go talk with Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon, and TJ's going to send the message down to, Herbig and Sawyer. And, everyone's going to talk with one another, and that culture is going to start getting set. And there's going to be a standard that starts to be set, at least before Mike McCarthy even gets this team in a room.
No, I think that's a great look at how this sort of gets established, when a new guy comes in, because like you said, it's one of those times of the season where a lot of people are on vacation, they're out of town. So it's going to be sort of whisper down the lane type stuff. So it will be interesting as more and more players get the chance to talk to McCarthy in person, either, over the phone or whatever, as he reaches out, to see what these players start putting out on social media, because we know a lot of them like to do that. So I'll be interested to sort of see what publicly they start talking about this new era in Pittsburgh. We got a great comment in the chat. We know we're getting close to lunch. People are getting hungry. He's saying, instead of fresh ribeye, we went with a day-old pierogi sandwich. I presume, referring to the repurposed McCarthy coming back to Pittsburgh, where he really didn't leave a dry eye in the house in terms of his emotional wellspring that he really just put out there, of how happy he was. But, the ribeye that he refers to, I suppose, is, the young guns, Shula on the defensive side and Shieldhouse on the offensive side with the Rams. But it's looking like, we had, a record number of coaching vacancies, but it's looking like a lot of teams have gone to, more established guys. And these two hot shots, Shula and Shieldhouse, are going to be basically back with the Rams and see what happens next year. So what do you make of that?
There's a few ways to make it out. I think for some of them, Shula did not want to interview necessarily with the Browns. The Browns wanted to interview him. He did not. He put the Steelers and other teams in front of them. I think that there is kind of a way to look at that, where you're a young guy, you're going to be desirable, you can kind of be selective, and if you don't get the jobs, what's he losing by going back to the Rams? What's Shieldhouse losing, right? Mike LaFleur, the Rams offensive coordinator, is thought to be one of the top candidates for that Arizona job. Well, if he goes, Shieldhouse is just going to be Sean McVay's OC. Pretty good job, right? That's not a bad one. I'd also think, though, it does portray those two as less than, perfect candidates. And I think that's one thing I want to say is, even though I pushed for those guys, let's be real here. Shula is a Sean McVay defensive coordinator. The last two defensive coordinators hired out of Sean McVay's trio were Raheem Morris and Brandon Staley. Both of them disasters in their next 10 years. Shula's defense, I think there is some questions about it. Shieldhouse has never called plays at the NFL level. He's been here two or 3 years in the NFL level. Now, he did coach down at Iowa State. Like the hiring pool of young candidates this year was just not sterling. It was less than ideal. It felt like guys that were a few years away. And so you saw just the strength of retreads. You saw Stefanski, you saw Saleh, you saw Harbaugh. You saw, a first-time head coach in Todd Monken at 59 years old. It's a weird cycle, man. And I think we're going to get a first-time head coach here. Click Kubiak's probably going to get either the open job in Las Vegas or Arizona. And my guess is whoever Arizona hires is probably also going to be a first-time head coach, because I think Kubiak's probably going to end up in Vegas. So that'll be a barometer there. Jesse Minter's like the one young guy that was hired. He was always going to Baltimore. Jeff Hafley, too, in that group in Miami. But a lot of these guys, man, are veteran coaches that are retreads, and that was kind of the theme of the cycle. Along with McCarthy, there was a lot of them this cycle.
No, you're right. We're getting along in the tooth in this special edition, but I do want to mention we had an obligatory Malik Willis question in the comments.
Yes.
But the signal that we're getting from McCarthy and some certain reports, he wants Rodgers back. He's very intrigued by Will Howard and, nice comments about Mason Rudolph. What % chance do we have the same quarterback room in Pittsburgh in 2026 as we did last year?
I think it's possible. It's really all about does Rodgers want to play? Because the Steelers want him. And here's the other thing to just think about. They reached out. And that Mike McCarthy reached out already. He said this, he reached out, and Mike McCarthy said that he's going to leave that in private, but he never said Aaron said no. And that's the thing. If McCarthy had reached out and Aaron said no, it's like, boom, done there, been there, done that. No, there's nothing that was done there. Clear to me, Aaron is thinking about it. And so I think it's really possible. As for Malik Willis, you can talk about the connections to Miami there. They hired John Eric Sullivan, who was a Packers executive. Jeff Hathley, the Packers defensive coordinator, will be down there. That to me feels like his landing spot. I think that they should pursue Malik Willis. I think he's their best possible outcome this offseason. But I think there's also going to be questions there about if they can land him over a team like Miami, who just has the natural pulls. The likelihood that it is going to be Aaron, Mason, and Will Howard is certainly there.
Well, I believe, like you do, that the door is wide open for Aaron Rodgers. I just hope we get an answer a lot sooner than last season if he is choosing to return and run it back in 2026. Nick, I just wanted to give you a couple seconds to preview what you'll be doing down at the Senior Bowl, looking for your content on Penn Live and social media. And I saw your tweet that Omar Khan, the GM, isn't down there, but Andy Weidel is. And it looks like Andy will be staying with the Steelers too, despite some interviews. So yeah, give us a flavor.
Yeah, I'm going to be writing about the standouts down here. I'm just kind of learning the draft class. Usually I would have a better grasp on the draft class coming into the Senior Bowl, but I've been covering a coaching search. I only have so much time in a day. So I'm trying to kind of play catch up there, but I'm learning about most of these guys. So I'll write about some standouts. I'll write about some guys there. I'm also, talking to people down here. This is like a little coaching convention. There's a bunch of college coaches. There's a bunch of agents. There's a bunch of, NFL personnel down here. I'll talk to you guys kind of about what I'm hearing. There's plenty of reaction, like Mike McCarthy being hired, where the Steelers are going, what might happen, their interest in some players. That's already a thing because the front office is working at will already. The front office stayed the same, so Omar and Andy already kind of have their guys to a degree. Lots of things coming over the next few days here from down in Mobile.
All right, guys, make sure to follow Nick's content on Penn Live, on Facebook, and on X, because he's going to be all over it down there in Mobile. And we'll be right back here, regular time, next Tuesday around 4 p.m. for the live show. And we'll have Nick unload his notebook on how this draft is shaping up and what signals the Steelers are sending in terms of what will be topping their agenda as they assemble the 2026 roster. Until then,